Our next speaker is someone who's been in the business of making things happen for the last pretty much your whole career, Becky, I suppose. Becky Bond was the senior advisor in the Bernie 2016 campaign, and she ran a lot of the organizing work that mobilized hundreds of thousands of Americans on a scale that hadn't been seen before to knock on doors, make phone calls, and really bubble up a lot of the creativity and energy that spurred that campaign to success. Not only was she employed by that campaign, but she's condensed a lot of those learnings into a book called Rules for Revolutionaries that's laid out a blueprint for how you make change happen at a grassroots level. I'd really love to welcome up to the stage Becky Bond.
It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me. I've been such a fan of what you all have been doing here. I watched the Yes campaign and what you did to win that landslide victory, which was amazing. Climate activists in the US have been following your Stop Adani campaign. You're so much further ahead of us going after these big coal producers. There's a lot that we have to learn from you. And there's so many people in this audience who have just been involved in all kinds of incredible movement organizing. So it's great to be part of this conversation. And really, of course, thanks to Ruby Rose O'Halloran and to Ed Miller and the whole economic fairness team at Get Up and everyone who was involved in putting on this event. So I know it's always a lot of work. So I do want to thank you, the audience, for being here. And you know, I perhaps have become famous for being a loser. And so thank you for listening. Because I was, best known for working for the candidate Bernie Sanders in his presidential campaign in 2016. That too. So yes, I was a senior advisor in 2015 and 2016 because our presidential campaigns are so long, to the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign. And even though we lost the election, we changed politics, how it was done in our country, and we created ripples that were felt around the world. And so that's the story that I want to talk to you all about tonight, and the message that I want to share with you is that with the right approach and the right ideas in the right moment, a revolution is possible in the way that we do politics. Now, it might not happen all at once, and we might end up going in the wrong direction for a little while. That can happen. But what the Sanders campaign proved in the United States, what the Corbyn Project is proving in the UK, is that too many people have been thinking too small about the vision that voters around the world are looking for. Now, I started working for Senator Sanders back in 2015, and what a lot of people don't know was that when Bernie Sanders announced that he was running for president, only 3% of the people knew who he was. He had only 3% name recognition, which meant essentially nobody knew who the guy was, right? And yet he almost pulled off a shocking upset to win the Democratic nomination for the presidency. And today, as was noted, he's consistently polling as the most popular sitting politician in America. So how did Bernie Sanders get from 3% name recognition to the most popular politician in the United States? Well, it wasn't by shifting to the center. That the center had shifted significantly to the left. Now, Bernie Sanders, he connected with millions of people who had been alienated by the leaders of the current political system. That might be a little familiar to you here. There have been people who have been written off, people who rarely voted or never voted. The parties just wrote them off. And then there were the people who had been taken for granted, right? These were the voters that the Democratic Party knew that they didn't have to address their problems, they didn't have to understand what was going on in their lives because they felt like they had nowhere to go. So Bernie knew that he had to engage all of these people, the people who'd been written off and the people who'd been taken for granted. And what he did was he set off to have an honest conversation about what was wrong in our country, the reforms we needed, and what we were all going to have to do together if we were going to actually be able to change things. I think it's important to note that Bernie Sanders didn't just go out with a platform, he didn't just go out with a list of policy ideas, though he certainly had those. He started with an analysis, right? He wanted to talk about what was wrong, what was the plan to fix it, and it turned out that a huge swath of the Democratic electorate actually agreed with him, especially those who've been sitting on the sidelines of politics. Now, at this time in our political history, Democrats had been touting this idea that there had been this fabulous economic recovery under President Obama. And also that we'd had this landmark win on healthcare, so we'd solved our problem with Americans not being able to access healthcare. But a lot of voters, they just weren't buying it because everybody they knew was struggling. And so what Senator Sanders did was he went out there and he just said, you know, it's simply not true what the Democrats are saying about the economy is great for everybody, and it's actually not true that everybody has access to healthcare. Right? He was just really honest about things, that real wages for most Americans had been going down for 40 years. And in fact, the recovery, I mean, some people recovered really well, right? The top 10th of the top 1%, not the top 1%, the top 10th of the top 1% owned as much wealth as the bottom 90% after our economic recovery. That's what they call the recovery. All right? And Obamacare, which was really hard to pass and really helped some people. Obamacare, which was supposed to be universal health care, what it really was something that forced everybody to buy health insurance. But many of these health insurance plans require patients to pay cash money at the point of need. And I'm not just talking about a $20 copay every time you go to see the doctor. There are people who have insurance plans that say you have to spend the first $10,000 before the insurance kicks in a calendar year. That means if you get sick in December, you have to pay $10,000, and then January 1, you have to pay another $10,000, right? So effectively, the American people were forced to buy insurance, but many of them still couldn't go to the doctor when they got sick, right? And so this was the challenges that the nation was facing, but our Democratic elected officials, they just weren't connecting with what was happening in real people's lives. So not only did Sanders talk about what was going on, but he offered an analysis, and he said, you know, we've got a rigged economy that's propped up by a corrupt political system where Wall Street banks and billionaires can buy elections. And he said it's going to take a political revolution, and millions of people are going to have to get involved if we want to change things. And when the voters heard Bernie explain the rigged economy and the broken political system, a lot of people wanted to get involved, right? Hundreds of thousands of people, including me, got to work for his campaign. And we defied the cynics and the political professionals, which there's a lot of overlap there. And we came very close to a shocking upset. But we lost, okay? It was very polite of you to say we came close. We lost, and what we discovered along the way, and we're still fighting, this is just the beginning, right? What we discovered along the way was that the political establishment in both of our parties are going to fight like hell to maintain the status quo that keeps them in power, even when it's clear that the electorate has shifted dramatically. So, all right? We don't just need to win the hearts and minds of the electorate. We don't just need to propose policies that are in the interest of the many, not the few, okay? We need tactics and infrastructure that will let us go toe-to-toe with the political establishment. And that's where this thing called big organizing comes in. All right, they have big money, they have powerful but out-of-touch institutions. We have people, and we have big organizing. So I want to go back to something I referenced before. Remember, Bernie started with only 3% name recognition. So when we started, and Ruby Rose O'Halloran talked about this, like, we don't have a Bernie Sanders, we don't have a Jeremy Corbyn here. Well, when we started, we didn't have a Bernie Sanders. Nobody knew who he was, right? Our biggest asset was the ideas that Bernie ran on, right? But our second biggest asset in the campaign was Bernie, that he was an authentic messenger, that people actually believed that if we elected him, he would actually fight for the things that he was talking about. But even with a bold message and an authentic messenger, you would never have heard about the Bernie Sanders campaign unless there had been a mass movement of people willing to fight for a left platform and elect the person that they thought would do his best to pass it in office. Now, with big organizing, insurgent ideas behind big ideas can take on the establishment and win. We can go up against these powerful forces of the status quo, and we can scale up volunteer talent and energy, and we can compete with their big money. Okay, so what is this thing called big organizing? It sounds good. Well, at the heart of big organizing is this idea that there is a huge but largely untapped capacity in the grassroots that's ready to be called into service. many of us were willing and able to make big commitments, right? And with the right kind of management and support, our efforts can be scaled up in ways that a generation of political operatives with their incremental policies, with their centrist agenda, with their disrespect for our big ideas, could never accomplish. What it takes is a big goal, authentic messengers, a movement to tap into, and a plan to win. So, oh good, that's a clicker. All right, so now I'm going to talk about a few of these rules that we learned in the course of our organizing. I want to share them with you because this isn't just about talking about something that happened in the past. We're talking about something that I'm going to do. This is about what we're all going to do together. So I'm going to tell you about a few things that I've learned that I think are helpful. Okay, the first rule is that people are ready to do something big to win something big. Look, you're not going to get a revolution if you don't ask for one. Remember, that's what Bernie Sanders did. He said it's going to take a political revolution and millions of people are going to have to get involved to make this happen. Now the flip side of this is people are less likely to do something small to win something small. All right? People who won't lift a finger for incrementalism, they'll move mountains if you put freedom and dignity on the ballot, and I think you all saw this. So imagine if instead of second-guessing, minor adjustments over the New Start allowance, what if the progressive parties in Australia said, in a country as wealthy as this one, no one should have to live in poverty, period, right? More of that, please, yes. Okay, we need solutions as radical as the problems we face. The challenges before us are so extreme that the best way forward is to embrace solutions to solve our problems. Instead of putting at the top of our agenda compromises that simply maintain the status quo, stop it from getting worse, or making it just slightly better. Half measures, how are they going to help us with the global climate crisis, right? Addressing the mass incarceration of indigenous people, like in the Welcome to Country, right? We can't a little bit solve that. Or what about the incarceration of people seeking asylum? Okay? We have the rise of automation that's making worse, less and less secure. You have the Great Barrier Reef, one of the world's most amazing natural wonders, and it's being bleached out of existence. Are we going to sort of do something about that? All right? Lives are at stake, communities are being decimated, and half measures will not do. And the thing about it is that people get this, right? The people know this, right? They're living through these crises, and being bold and radical in the light of these challenges, it doesn't look naive. What looks naive is being incremental and modest and moderate, right? Young people especially, they really get this. They know the most practical thing we can do right now is actually solve the problems, right? As soon as possible. And they think it's delusional that we keep trying to kick the can down the road and not deal with this stuff. So how are we going to do it? All right, we need a plan to win. All right, not just an idea that we need to all get together and do something. If we're going to win big change, we need a plan to win. And we need to share it with everyone. We need to publish this plan to win. Because we're going to need so many people to participate that we're not going to be able to have a series of one-on-ones to tell people how we're going to do this. We're not even going to be able to have a series of meetings like this one, right, to share the strategy. Right? We need to have something that we can communicate with people, what they have to do, at what scale we need to do it, if we're going to have a shot of even getting close to a win. Now, transparency about this plan to win is really crucial to getting enough people involved that winning is within reach. And there's no way to keep a plan that depends on thousands, even hundreds of thousands of volunteers, secret. So we shouldn't even pretend to do that. We need to share the plan to win with our volunteers at the same level of detail that we would share it with senior strategists. Now, this kind of radical candor and openness doesn't just apply to organizing in any kind of big project in management, business, or politics. This is important because we have to be open about the scale of the challenge, what it will take to win, and that will allow people to join our vision, right, with confidence that it will work if we do what the plan says. But most important, people need to know how to get to work without ever engaging with someone who works at Get Up or who works in a labor union because there's so much work to do. Another thing we're going to have to do is talk to all of the people, not just some of them. This is a huge problem that we have in the United States. And in the United States, parties are becoming increasingly irrelevant. And that doesn't mean that we should seek to be bipartisan, right? Because it's the kind of incrementalism and crippling compromises from bipartisan solutions that kills our ability to do big organizing. If we're really going to change things. We're not in a bipartisan moment, but we're in a transpartisan one where people are looking beyond parties for solutions. Now, one of the reasons why independent, proudly progressive organizations like Get Up are so popular and so good at mobilizing people is they give people the opportunity to participate in politics outside of the bureaucracies and hierarchies of the traditional political structure. That's why people are increasingly looking to unions, NGOs, to young people for agitation and leadership in this moment. Because ordinary people, we're just way more radical and open to new ideas than the people that represent us in government. Right, now we're getting a little technical, but this is really important and I want to communicate this. The plan has to be centralized, but the work needs to be distributed. So we've seen this, and we saw this at the beginning of the Bernie movement. Just because you get thousands of people in motion, it doesn't mean you're going to get closer to victory, right? You got people marching, organizing music festivals, building websites, trending things on Twitter. These are all great things, right? But it takes a centralized plan to harness and scale volunteer efforts so that they all add up to victory. Now, you know a little bit about this in Australia. It's how so many organizations, companies, and individuals were able to come together and mobilize for marriage equality and win that landslide victory a year ago. So if you have a credible plan to win and you can invite people to get to work on that bold goal, you do have a shot at building a volunteer army, and the plan needs to make clear what people can do, where they are, and how that's all going to add up to making victory possible. Now, to give you like sort of an idea of how this works and how powerful this can be, is I was reading about the ACTU marches that happened all over Australia, but in particularly in Melbourne last month. And, right? Yeah? Okay. All right. So apparently 150,000 people showed up at the march in Melbourne, which is amazing, right? Okay, so let's do just a tiny bit of math. This is organizer math, so it's not that complicated. All right, let's say that 150,000 people, let's say they spent 4 hours engaging in that march, right? Many spent far more, but let's say 150,000 people spent 4 hours on that march each, right? That is 600,000 hours of work, all right? Now, if those 600,000 hours were spent knocking on doors, okay, and having conversations with people, because that's why we knock on doors, right? You'd only have to knock on less than 4 doors an hour to knock on every single door in the state of Victoria. That's amazing, right? All right, if you spent that 600,000 hours of work on the Get Up phone dialing system, you could call everyone in Australia like several times. I'm sure they're going to ask you to do this. Like, now, of course, this is a ridiculous exercise because lots of doors are miles apart, and we actually don't have the phone number of everybody in Australia. But you just get this idea, like, if we can take mass participation from the realm of marches to the work of winning progressive victories, a lot becomes possible that we haven't even been considering. Okay, another rule is the revolution will not be staffed, or it won't be fully staffed, okay? So we need our movement to be big and powerful, and that's going to require having some full-time, locked-in paid staff. But we just can't organize everyone everywhere with paid staff. And this is what it's going to take. We're going to have to organize everyone everywhere. Our goals are so big. They're too big for that. And too many people will need to get involved. Even if we had all the money we needed, we wouldn't have the right people in the right places in the right moment that were ready to stop their own jobs, right, and get paid to do the work. And so in the big organizing strategy, even though we need paid staff, the role of that paid staff isn't to organize the people, right? It's to provide support in person or online to the volunteers who are going to actually do that work, right? And that's through training, that's through going out in the field and showing people how things are done. And it's also through managing the technology platforms, the communication infrastructure, you know, the workflow management systems necessary for a massive amount of volunteers to actually organize at a scale that will allow us to change society. And there's this outdated stereotype of the heroic or inspirational, badass or rock star organizer, and that needs to go, all right? Because organizing is about service, right? It's about how organizing staff can help the people, right, organize for their own liberation, because they're the ones that are going to be able to make the change. Okay, next rule is to place radical trust in volunteers. And this is hard for me because I'm a control freak. But one of our principles is that you have to place radical trust in volunteers. And we just can't wait for NGOs or political leaders to lead us when we need to change things right now. But if we put radical trust in volunteers, we can just get started. We can get started, right? But we have to trust them to do work at all levels, not just that last mile of knocking on the door or making the phone call. They actually have to help run the infrastructure. And part of that radical trust is we have to trust that they're ready to do a ton of work, right? A lot of work. And radical trust doesn't just mean giving the keys to the operations to the volunteers. It also means trusting that they want to be held accountable. And that they're willing to do what it takes to win if we've shared that with them. And it's going to take a lot to win. And so radical trust means we have to hold them accountable, even when that is sometimes uncomfortable, or they have to do things that are risky or involve sacrifice. And this last rule that I'm going to share with you is one that I really learned working on the Bernie Sanders campaign, which is that as we do this work, let's not ask who wants to lead, let's ask who wants to get to work. All right, this is really important. We have so much work to do, right? And when you ask who wants to get to work, different people step forward than when you ask who wants to lead. And as it turns out, you want the people who want to get the work to be the leaders, because they're amazing. And that's actually where the best leaders can be found. So in closing, I'm just going to say, these are principles that are working not just in the US, but I've been working a lot with people involved in the Corbin Project, and what they're being able to achieve has a lot to do with what we've been able to achieve in the United States, and we're seeing it also here in some of your amazing campaigns. And it is up to us, these people, those of us who are in this room, right, to organize mass participation of an informed citizenry, to help people get to work starting now, to build a society that works for the many, not the few. And while we may stumble along the way, all right, we will prove in the process that so much more is possible that the political establishment on either side is willing to admit. So I want you to remember that people are ready to be asked to do something big, to win something big. And to get more people involved, we don't move to the center. We get people involved, and then the center will move to us. All right? And we do that, yes. Right? And we do that by striving for the big solutions that can actually solve the crazy big problems that we're facing today. Because let's face it, if we don't solve these problems, who will, right? But the good news is I think we're even more ready than we actually know. Thank you.